Leviticus 19, 31 through 37, really focusing right there at the beginning. Yeah, this was one of those weeks where the words took a little longer. It wasn't because I did not know what I wanted to say, but more of the case this time of how to say it, because I do not want it to sound like our kids are degenerates. I do not want it to sound like all gray-haired individuals are sages. And we're going to roll those two thoughts together, and I'm going to try to make that make sense in a few minutes. But just understand that I took a while to process how this is going to come out today, and I hope it comes out the right way. I don't need your rocking chair. George Jones declares that gray hair is not a sign that it's the time to retire. And then as you saw in the clip, he uses another old man, George Foreman, to get his point across. Sentiment shared by 85-year-old Caleb in Joshua 14 when the land is being divided. And Caleb goes to Joshua and he says, I believe that gray-haired men could and should climb the mountain, should conquer the giants. I believe that we have value. I believe that there is a place for us in the conquering of the nation of Canaan. And I want my part so that I can go and do what my strength allows me to do. Daniel was a young man when he first withstood the test of his faith in Babylon. But if you watch the transition of rulers, he's an old man when he entered the lion's den. He's probably, based on chronology there, in his mid-80s. And yet he was willing to go stand before the lions. Men of faith. Men whose hair had begun to turn white or had turned completely white or gray. Yet they saw themselves as having value. They saw themselves as able to take a spiritual stand. Scripture holds up men and women of faith regardless their age. But I want us to notice this morning that it puts a premium on the faithful with more miles on their odometer. Scripture puts a premium on gray hair, on the wisdom and the faith and the righteousness that comes with being battle-tested, with having survived and conquered throughout life. Leviticus 19 and verse 32, the text that we were reading, I'm going to go back and tie 31 into it a little bit later. You shall stand up in the presence of the gray-headed. Honor elders. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord. Leviticus 19 and verse 32. That's from the New American Standard. The New Century Version says it this way: show respect to old people. Stand up in their presence. Show respect also to your God. I am the Lord. Proverbs 16 verse 31. Gray hair is like a crown of glory. It is earned by living a good life. So it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not anything that we have to cover up, that we have to hide. It's not something that just because our hair turns gray, we get pushed into the corner. Chapter 20 and verse 29, the young glory in their strength, and the old are honored for their gray hair. And then finally, 1 Timothy 5 verses 1 and 2, do not speak angrily to an older man. Plead with him as if he were your father. That's any of the older men. Treat younger men like brothers, older women like mothers. Younger women like sisters. Always treat them in a pure way. regardless how old you are. Number one, we're going to talk about having value. But regardless how old you are, until you are the oldest person in the room, there is always someone older. So when he says, stand up before the gray-haired, honor the older, he is making a statement that is applicable across the board. That there is always someone older and wiser to whom we are to be people who show respect. And yet, sadly, respect for age is becoming a lost art in our world. As a general rule, we are a youth-obsessed culture. We are a culture that emphasizes the young. We are a culture that emphasizes staying young as long as possible. In 2022, United States citizens alone spent $26 billion on plastic surgery. That's a chunk of change. And that doesn't count the Botox and the creams and the supplements and everything else we chase looking for this fountain of youth, as if there's no glory in aging. As if there's no glory in clocking miles on our odometer and surviving and being wiser and stronger and more faithful for it. We want to look young. You know, it's not a huge deal other than vanity. I'm not saying you don't dye your hair. I'm not saying you cannot have work done or whatever. But what I'm saying is our culture has now, and you can go check me. Go watch our society. Our culture is now reaping one of the byproducts of wanting to stay young and emphasizing youth. And that byproduct is a lack of respect for age. We no longer see the beauty in age. We want to classify beauty only in youth. We went through this phase where we only wanted to hire young people. Older people got pushed out of the workforce. I'm not talking bad about ours, but do you see where that has us? We have kids that won't show up for work. We have kids that won't get a job, period. We have kids that can't make change. We have kids that have no respect. We have kids that do not know how to serve. And yet we've pushed towards retirement those who have already learned those things. We dismiss older people, ignore them, get impatient when they don't move as fast as we move, or they don't work their phones as well as we work our phones, or whatever the case is. And some even see the aged as disposable. There are underlying currents in our culture where they're trying to legalize euthanasia just based on age, where you age out of being valuable in our culture and we just throw the switch and get rid of you. Now then, I want you to understand that's a fairly recent phenomenon in all of that, because there are those of us with the gray hair already that can remember a time when it was not like this. Ancient cultures, and then even earlier generations in our culture, and it really wasn't that long ago, even though my child is convinced that my world was black and white because my TV was black and white, it really wasn't that long ago, and I would argue even in the mid-1900s to even a little later, where age was venerated, where the oldest man in the community had the most respect in the community. And it was nothing unusual to have 3 generations living in a house. Now then, listen, note here, big note. I'm not saying that no longer being able to care for your parents or your grandparents in your home is a sign of disrespect. 2 different things. Disconnected those things. All right. There was a time when outside of the home, age was respected. Young people have never seen this. There was a time when an older person walked into a room that you stood up out of respect. Where you physically stood up if somebody was coming in the door and you walked over to the door to hold the door open. Where you always spoke kindly. Where you removed your hat when you stepped into a conversation, especially with a lady. To hear how to just walk through Walmart or to sit at the mall or to be at a gas, whatever, to hear how some talk to those of my generation and older. However, it would seem that we are now viewed as a plague on society. As if there's no longer any value because we're a little bit older to watch how doors get let go of and hit older people as they're walking behind them rather than holding a door for someone. To watch a little lady struggle with her groceries to try to pick up a case of water in Walmart's parking lot while muscled young men walk by. Sounds kind of like the story of the Good Samaritan, doesn't it? Listen, this is where, back to the beginning, I said it gets a little dicey. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm not necessarily talking about ours. I'm talking about a culture. When things happen in a culture, the decline of the family, it begins to erode other things. Well, when a culture quits respecting those with some age, it begins to erode other things in society. So part of the lesson this morning, and this is, again, I said this applies to all of us, because we all have someone who is older than us. Be careful, but especially our younger generations, be careful how you look at those who are older than you. Look at them with respect. Look at them as if they have earned the right to exist in your world rather than just being in the way. Be careful how you respond verbally to people who are older than you. Now, I emphasize yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, and no, sir. Parents, that may not be emphasized in your home. I would encourage you to. I think it's vital. But it can be done other ways. But there are certain ways when an adult addresses you as a younger person that you address him or her back. There are ways that you hold a conversation with an adult that are different than the way maybe we hold conversations in our generation, where you kids talk to each other one way. Be careful how you respond non-verbally to older people. So they understand that they're not a bother. That you're not insulted just by their presence. Be careful how you act in Bible class. In school. There is a measure of respect that should come just by that individual being the teacher. Whereas the student, we respond a certain way. And when we get corrected, we accept the correction. And we're not smart-mouthed. And we're not disrespectful. Go back to Scripture, there's no doubt we should be respectful to all. But age should bring some additional privileges. Or at least God thinks so. So some practicals. Young people, open doors. Open doors, period, but especially open them for older people. Don't watch them struggle with a walker or a cane trying to get through a door because you're in the middle of enjoying your French fries. Or you have somewhere else to be or something else to do. Be patient. Even at my age, I no longer move as quickly as I did. And that continues as we get to be patient with us. Maybe we don't work our phones as fast as you do. Guess what? We weren't born with one in our cribs. We still had to walk to the wall and pick it up off the wall and turn the little dial. I'm actually old enough to remember having to pick it up and check, make sure nobody else was already on the party line. And no child in here has any idea what I just said. Be patient with us. Do not dismiss us. Our value did not cease when the lines began to appear, when the hair began to disappear or to change colors. Listen when we speak. Even if we're not extending wisdom to you that you need to absorb for another reason, just have the respect to listen when someone talks to you. Make eye contact. Be engaged. Be in the conversation rather than, please let him quit talking. I heard this story last week when he came to church. Even obey. You know, a Bible class teacher gives you an instruction. That person is a person of authority. Obey. Be careful how you move around older people. You know, we want our kids to play and enjoy being in a place of fellowship. But if so-and-so's walking down the aisle and her hip's brand new, and she's struggling to get down the aisle, and she gets run over by a 5-year-old that's built like a linebacker, we now got 2 hip issues. So be careful how you move around older people. And I'm going to add some general things to that. Young people, don't interrupt. This has become the most interrupting culture I could have ever imagined. If a conversation's going on, and I'm going to add this, into which you were not extended an invitation, number one, do not step into it. Have enough respect to stay back until you're included. And number two, don't interrupt. It's just rude. Watch your tone. Watch the level of your voice and the way you use your words. And be respectful in general. Now then, quickly, I want to go back to Leviticus 19. We're going to make some biblical application. You shall stand up in the presence of the gray-headed and honor elders, and you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. He never broke stride in what he was saying. He just tied respect for age and respect for the Lord together. Respect for others, the way we treat other people, is a good indicator, is a good gauge of how we respect God. Because what? Love God, love your neighbor. Notice the flow. Respect God, respect your elders. There's a connection. Now, we're going to go back to the beginning really quickly. Like I said, this was one of those weeks where the words took a little longer. It wasn't that I didn't know what I want to say. I wanted how to say it. And I said this. I said, I don't want it to sound like our kids are degenerates. And so I'm not saying our kids are degenerates in how they react to older people. I'm simply saying that as a culture, we need work. Number two, I said, I don't want it to sound like all gray-haired individuals are sages. I have met some gray-haired people who really needed to stop talking. All right, that there was no longer anything of value in their coming out. And there probably wasn't when they were younger. All right, some of the teachers we see on TV and so on. But we're going to roll them together. So part B, and this ties into your homework from Wednesday. We are an AI-obsessed culture. We are a culture that wants to ask Alexa or Google or Bixby or whatever for the answer, and we want it easy, and we want it quick, and we want every question answered, and we want to move on. Some of those questions, absolutely, you can ask your Alexa all you want. They're innocuous. What's the time? What's the weather? What time does McDonald's close? Whatever. But there are life-altering questions you do not need to ask AI. Questions that require answers that come from experience. Questions that require answers that include wisdom, that include thought. AI is not always the answer. I asked mine the same question 2 times in a row just to run a test. And this was Google, I was just typing it. About baptism. Day 1, I got that baptism is a necessary step in salvation, that you cannot be saved without it. Absolutely scripturally right in every way. I looked at everything. The very next day, I asked the exact same question, worded the exact same way, and I was told that baptism is not necessary, that it's just a tradition that we do to show that we believe in. Okay. Same answer. Same question, 2 different answers. So AI is not always the answer. So I said, in your homework Wednesday night, I said, try ask a living human being. Try to, some of those things that need more than, well, the time is 8:04 p.m. For some of you, it's probably no big deal. Some of you probably never take out your phone and ask it questions. Others, not so much. Others, it's the first reaction. It's hard to resist the urge. And it's such a part of our lives that we forgot. And so, if you did your homework, if you took the time to ask for advice from a living person, or the answer to a question, did you notice anything? Did you notice that there is a benefit from person-to-person interaction that you do not get listening to? I'm not going to say Alexa because she looked at me earlier and goes, why do you always have to say Alexa? That you do not get talking to Google or to Bixby or to Siri. Did you notice that there is a connection that you can make if you go to a wiser person or an older person and ask for information that you cannot make with your electronic device? Did you notice that you can get more than a superficial answer? Or you can even get a benefit from the experience of the one that you ask. It's not that he or she just knows the answer, it's he or she has lived the answer, has done those things, and knows the feelings, and knows the reactions, and knows the drawbacks and the benefits. Gray hair, when accompanied by righteousness, Proverbs 16 and verse 31, is a wealth of wisdom. It is a well that we can draw off of, so that gray hair becomes a sign that radiates, I have lived through life and I have some answers. And if you come to me, I will and that means on the other side, those of us who are older and younger ones come with questions, that we have to have the wisdom and the respect to answer those questions. So it becomes a two-way street. But what I want you to understand, young people especially, is if you look around, you are surrounded, when you add up all of our ages, by centuries of wisdom that is available just by you asking. Make the most of it. And now I'm going to take what I said. I was going to come back to Leviticus. I focused on 32. Stand up before the aged, honor them. What did he say in the previous verse? Do not go to the spiritists and the mediums to look for your answers. So that connection I was making Wednesday night with AI and that idea. Find the wisest person in the room. I was taught something when I was a kid. Always talk to the smartest person in the room, because you'll always learn something. Think about that spiritually. That we begin to gravitate towards the wisdom that's available to us. Wisdom is with the aged, and with long life comes understanding. Job 12 and verse 12. David even writes in Psalm 71 and verse 18 that he was cherishing the idea of growing older. And even when I am old and gray, All right, when it might be time for some to check out or retire, God, do not abandon me until I have had the opportunity to declare your strength to the next generation. Not only allow me to get older, but stay with me. Let me keep my mind and let me keep my strength so that I can share it with those around me. For centuries, the elders in a society were considered sages. They would gather at the gate and people would line up to ask them questions. So again, look around. Combined ages equal centuries in here, and those centuries equal wisdom, and they equal answers. Make use of your resources. And that's another way that we honor the gray-haired. Please do not follow the trend of our culture. Maybe some of this has to do with the fact that I'm aging into that group and I don't need to be dismissed anymore. And Chloe went. And we joke and we play and it's all good. And I take every bit of it and I love it. But our culture, it's not joking and playing about it. Our culture is dismissing the gray-haired. Our culture is ignoring that generation. And it's missing out. Don't do that, church. And be very, very careful how you interact with those who have earned some respect just by having a little age. That wisdom, he said, came from a faithful life. He said it in the Old Testament, translating it into the New Testament, that wisdom comes from bowing at Calvary and realizing I'm not the wisest person in the room. And I am dependent upon the God of all wisdom to share that with me through Christ and to save me through His Son. So if you've not obeyed the gospel this morning, there's a lack of wisdom in your life. And it's time to do that. If you have obeyed the gospel, how do you interact with those who are older and wiser than you? So we stand and sing.